Good morning and welcome to 50 Forward Black Voices of Nashville. I'm Melvin D. Fowler, Center Director for 50 Forward Bordeaux and member of the 50 Forward Diversity, Opportunity, Vision, and Equity Committee known as DOVE. Today's forum was created to learn about the life and experiences of some of Nashville's most outstanding African and African American leaders. I'm delighted you have joined us for this special event in honor of Black History Month. I hope you will be inspired to take action in a meaningful way that uplifts and advances our community. Now, please welcome my dear friend and our moderator, Dr. Melva Black. Melva is currently the Assistant Dean of Humanities at Volunteer State Community College. Please welcome Dr. Melva Black.
Thank you, Melvin, and good morning to everyone. To the 54 family, my heartfelt gratitude for creating this platform for us to learn and to use that knowledge to advance not only ourselves, but our communities. And to our guest panelists, who I'll introduce in a moment, thank you so very much in advance for sharing your history and your wisdom. I want to introduce everyone that's a part of today's panel. I'll begin with Judge Rachel Bell. Rachel Bell is a presiding General Sessions Court Judge, Division 8 and Music City Community Court. Her mantra is, justice does not stop at the courthouse steps. Next is Pastor Keith Caldwell. Pastor Caldwell is the former NAACP president and co-founder of the Urban Epicenter. He currently serves on the executive board of the Intergenerational Ministerial Fellowship. Next is Vera Coleman. Ms. Coleman, who is affectionately called Miss Vera, is a Nashville native and retired from a career in medical research spanning nearly 30 years. She presently is a participant in the All of Us research program, serving as a peer ambassador. Next is Senator Brenda Gilmore. Senator Gilmore has been serving the Nashville community for more than 2 decades as a strong voice for Nashville on the Metro Council and as an experienced and progressive leader in the Tennessee General Assembly State House. Our 5th panelist is Elijah Avery. Mr. Avery is originally from Cape Town, South Africa. He is passionate about narrowing the inequality gap in this country. He currently works as the All of Us Project Outreach Coordinator at 50 Forward. And our final panelist is Emily Ariamiato. She was born and raised in Benin City, Nigeria. Emily has called Nashville home for more than 30 years. She currently works for 50 Forward as a care manager for the Living at Home services. Welcome to all of you. And again, thank you so very much for sharing your time and your wisdom and knowledge with us this morning. So we don't belabor any more time. I certainly want to jump right into the business at hand. We have a series of questions that you will all be asked this morning. And again, you have 2 to 3 minutes to answer each of the questions that will be posed. We will allot time toward the end of our session this morning to respond to guest questions. So question number 1, who do you credit having contributed to your achievements and career sustainability? It's a 2-part question. And what life lesson did you learn from them? Who do you credit having contributed to your achievements and career sustainability? And what life lesson did you learn from them? I'll begin on my screen to my left, and we'll begin with Senator Gilmore.
Thank you, Dr. Black. So I don't know if there's one central person that I credit with my career sustainability. My grandmother raised me, and I think she instilled in me hard work. I can remember her wearing high heels every single day and her little starched apron. She would be in the kitchen singing Christian songs and would just get happy with nobody in the kitchen but her. So I think that I learned hard work and to trust in God from her. The But I think also that I've had so many positive people who have poured into my life that I feel like that has helped my career and helped me in this life journey. Even on this panel, Miss Vera, when I started running for Metro Council, was a part of my prayer circle. And if there was any city decision that I had to make and I didn't feel like I had enough expertise, then she had a prayer circle that would pray for me. And then even you, Dr. Black, managed my campaign when I was running for a state representative. So I think God has always planted positive people in my life. Even when I was a young girl growing up in Gallatin, there was a little Church of Christ teacher. When I transferred to Gallatin High, I grew up in a predominantly African-American school, transferred to Gallatin High, which was predominantly white. And of course, I felt lost there. I had been making A's in Union High, went to Gallatin High, and was making D's and F's. And this little Church of Christ teacher took me under her arms. So God has just, again, always planted positive people in my life. And I think that that's what has sustained me. The lessons that I've learned is just to try as hard as you can, give it everything you got when you're trying to do something, accomplish something. Trust God for the journey. And when things don't work out, then I just believe it wasn't meant for me. When they do work out, I thank God and celebrate it.
Thank you so much. And we'll move to a whole different generation. We'll move to Elijah.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. But to answer the question, like Gilmore said, I really can't attribute my success, if you can call it that, to one particular person. I would say for me personally that I'd attribute a lot of it to educators, just in general, especially in the Tennessee area, and those who have taught me and raised me essentially, because I mean, I think teachers are essentially the parents of the schools. Like when kids aren't at home, they're at school. And for me, seeing a lot of minority teachers really succeed and be passionate about various topics and be able to teach everyone like how important they are, like American history. And I'm not from America, so just seeing how history affects just everything and one's outlook on the country, I think education is incredibly important. And for me, especially my higher education, I think with, you know, college and things like that, I was able to learn how to actually navigate through this world as an African-American male, which is a different experience, and it does take a way of maneuvering in order to be successful. And that is something that I learned in my educational career, at least. And so I think that's who I would give credit to a lot of my success.
Thank you so much, Elijah. Pastor Caldwell.
So, Dr. Black, I want to thank you, 50 Forward, and the distinguished panelists. I'm honored to be here. So to answer the question, I have two mothers. So my natural mother would be Corella Caldwell. She's passed on, but she had 11 children. She was so powerful, and she insisted that we both were intelligent and that we got education, because the two weren't the same. And she made the distinction. And she always made sure we walked with integrity. And just because we were experiencing economic poverty, that did not in any way diminish the dignity that we needed to live in. The other mother, she is so powerful in that she is the mother of all of the historic Black colleges and universities. She is the mother of all the historic civil rights organizations, NAACP, Urban League, CORE. She is the mother of Pan-Hellenic. She is the Black church. And she was in this country before this nation was a nation. She was sold on the auction block, and yet she found a way to resist. And she continues to resist even to this day through institutions and through this faith that we have, that we understand that the conditions on the ground might look really bad, but we can move in a way to transform our reality on this side of the grave, and that we don't have to wait to the great by and by, yonder ways when the wicked shall cease from troubling and the weary would be at rest, that we could have justice on this side of the grave. So I'm eternally indebted to both of my mothers. The lessons learned is there's a rich and illustrious legacy that comes from both. And so from my natural mother, it is in my 4 adult children and even my grandchildren to continue that learning and impartation about identity and who we are. And for the Black church legacy is to continue to be a prophetic voice in this city, in this nation, and for this world. So those are my influences.
Thank you so much, Pastor Caldwell. We'll swing just a little bit from your generation to another generation, and we'll ask Emily to share her response.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. Good morning. I would say having strong faith in God has always I'm sorry, yeah. My family has been a big contributor to my education, my life. They have always been there. My professors from Tennessee State University's a social work program, they were always there for me as well. My sister, Dr. Rachel Eremiatoy, has always had strong faith in me that I should never give up. Will always achieve anything that I set my mind on in life. A lot of encouragement. Yes, and all the lessons I've learned, I've passed it on to my children to encourage them that without education in this life, you will be nothing. You always have to have the education, forward your education. I've always stressed it out to my children.
Thank you so very much, Emily. We'll move to Judge Bell next.
Good morning to everybody. And thank you for that question. I would agree with everything that everybody said, to be honest. But to be about Rachel Bell, what really, I think who really deposited what was needed in me. But I would say my community, the village, and the church. And many of you on this screen were part of that village. If it was my great-great-grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, but my mom and my dad, I would give them all the credit for how I have been able to be, successful, especially as a young individual in politics. And then Brenda Gilmore, Senator Brenda Gilmore, as a mentor. I mean, you have to see somebody that you want to be like. And all the way from the natural hair, you can see my hair is starting to look like hers over the last few years. All the way to just wanting to do your best. And so what she said earlier, trust God, always do your part. But my mom and my dad have always told me, meet people well and to stay grounded and do your part. All of us have a responsibility. All of us have to hold ourselves accountable, no matter what it is. If it's cleaning up the streets, as you see, I've adopted highways. If it's cleaning up the streets, do your part. If it's standing in the pulpit, preach the word. If it's being a representative and standing in the gap, do it like Senator Brenda Gilmore. I mean, this village, this community, our people, our schools, our church has raised Rachel Bell or Judge Rachel Bell. I am a product of this community. I would say, hopefully, you see these t-shirts all the time. I am our ancestors' wildest dream. And I would say so. From Bordeaux, North Nashville, 37208, 37218. I think I am one of those people that are continuing to learn and do my part. So my mantra is, yes, justice does not stop at the courthouse steps, but it's starting to pivot and shift into perform well and you'll always win. And so I've learned that even in basketball, when I lost some games, nobody really cared about how many points I scored. If I won the game or lost the game, they looked at my performance. If I performed well in defense, if I performed well in running that ball down, if I did my part and gave it all I had when I was out on the court. And so I try to live my life that way as well. If I can keep on drinking the water that Senator Brenda Gilmore is drinking and my mom and dad, then I think I will continue to hopefully be the next generation of leadership under their tutelage. I mean, I am still under their tutelage and I appreciate their mentorship. So I've always got to tell Senator Brenda Gilmore, thank you for being the model and also teaching me how to serve in this role.
Thank you so very much, Judge Bell. Last but not least, for our first question is Miss Vera.
Good morning, everybody. Glad to be here. And I'd just like to start out with, I am a person of faith, and I strive to be a person of integrity, one of hope and humility, and last but not least, of gratitude. And I guess if I would look at the who in my life involved many people, my parents, my church, Sunday school teachers, my teachers and my coaches in school, and my neighbors. If there is a common theme among all of them, it would have been, and it is just stay grounded and find and operate in your purpose. That is, you can't operate in somebody else's purpose. The shoe won't fit. And so there were many people that, especially teachers and folk in the neighborhood, that I wanted to emulate, but still I had to see that I had a purpose. God gave me a purpose. My parents always taught me that, and I was an athlete. I was a jock, and so I think a lot of the lessons that I learned in playing sports served me how to lose. I wasn't a person that was very gracious in losing. You know, you don't have to be so gracious when you're winning, but when you're losing. So if I knew that I put forth every effort and it didn't turn out right, then I had to just swallow it. And the other thing, the people in the neighborhood, you know, they didn't mind meddling, quote unquote. You know, if they saw that you were not living to your potential, then they call you on the carpet about it. And I just appreciate that so much. I appreciate that. And I love who I am. And I always say when I was younger, I tried to hang around the older people. And now that I'm older, I try to hang with the younger ones. I learned so much. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Kristen, for roping me in. And I do still love you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vera. This first question was about your personal achievements and your career sustainability and the lessons that you learned. And the theme that seems to have emerged from your collective responses is the powerful necessity of family, of a strong community, of faith, and good morals and ethics. So those are the things when I heard from your responses that I took from those, that I'm hoping our audience today also can apply those things in their living. So thank you very much for your responses to our very first question. We're going to shift a little bit and move to the topic of health and wellness. I want to give you a little context before I ask the question. In 1919, there was a period known as Red Summer, when white supremacists, terrorism, and racial riots took place in more than 36 cities that decimated Black communities from Tulsa, Oklahoma to DC. 72 years later, in 1991, Rodney King would be savagely beaten by the hands of white LA police officers. 27 years after the Rodney King horror, Nashville police officer Andrew Delk is alleged to have shot Daniel Hambrick in the back 3 times. Only 2 years following, the nation would watch George Floyd being murdered by a white officer. Unfortunately, there are many more names and abhorrent injustices that could be added to this recall of Black history. As you think about these accounts and others similar in nature, the question is, what do you perceive to be some long-term physical and/or mental health consequences of Black and brown people as a result of our current racial climate? What do you perceive to be some long-term physical and/or mental health consequences of Black and brown people as a result of the current racial climate? I'll begin with Ms. Vera.
You know, as I thought about that question, I thought about when I was a child and the historical events that you just mentioned, Dr. Black. When I was a child, there was a publication called the Pittsburgh Courier. That was a newspaper. And we saw and we were able to read. My mother insisted that we read these things, that all of the atrocities and injustices were happening in the Black community. And she wanted us to be aware of that, particularly my brother, because she just felt like that the male was just, you know, just vulnerable. He would go out more than we would. My sister and I would be at home. But, you know, through all of that, I guess that I learned from her that it's out there. It's been there a long time. It's been there over 400 years. So the distinction was made. But as far as the mental impact, I guess because she was so positive, I was positive. These things exist, but the ingenuity of the adults and my mother in my community, they kind of taught us how to maneuver through that. Yes, there are some things you can't change, but the things that you can change, you be your best at that. And she also said, each generation has its own responsibilities. And she would led me to believe that this is the way it is now, but a change is coming. And so that's my response to that. It was awful.
Thank you so very much for sharing. I'm going to ask Elijah to share next, please.
It's such a loaded question. It's difficult, but I would say for me especially, I think the long mental health consequence would be the feeling of just being either not enough or being behind other ethnicities or other individuals who don't belong to a particular community. And especially coming from Cape Town, South Africa, where I don't know if you all are aware of the whole apartheid situation and how that was only abolished the year I was born. And like in America, that didn't solve the racial issues that went on after it legally became illegal. So especially growing up in that sort of situation, being the only African American at my primary school, and even when I moved to the States, still being one of the few African Americans in my educational setting and even at my workplaces, I always felt like I had to do a little bit extra, a little bit more, just so I could be at the same level as everyone else. And also speaking with people from the African American community, just the way I've had some of my students talk as far as like, oh, well, I just need to make a little bit more money and then I'll be like here, or I need to, get this particular job and then I'll be fine. And it's just like, why are we only striving to be fine? Like, I feel like there's just this overwhelming sense of just it's survival when I really feel like we should be thriving like everyone else should be. And so I would say just that constant yearning for just being okay is something that is mentally not great for individuals in minority communities. And I think that's something that is changing, but I think it's one of the largest mental health consequences.
Thank you so very much, Elijah. Pastor Caldwell.
So for me, I'm thinking about, when you think about histories of oppression and this communal trauma that comes and that gets lodged in the bodies of Black and brown people. So, and what we have to do to throw that off is, so we used to call it internalized colonization, but then that blames the person who's actually suffering. So it's more of a appropriated, racialized oppression. So what we'll do is, me and my identity, I grew up here in Nashville, and I knew that once I crossed Charlotte and went over toward West End, that my body, my very body, it wasn't that I was doing something wrong, it was that I was something wrong, because a white supremacist culture had assigned criminality to my body. And so not only was I under the white gaze, I was under white surveillance and trying to figure out how to get out from under that. And I was reading the souls of Black folk and different things to try to figure out, because I knew that that this was systemic, and then we have to deal with the brutal legacy of white supremacy. So you chronicled this history, but we can bring it all the way up to the insurrection that we are experiencing. And white supremacy actually was placed on trial, and it got by with it, but it didn't get away with it, as my grandmother used to say. And what has happened is the whole world has seen because it was also another trial in the court of public opinion. So the denial, the sleight of hand, the post-racial kinds of monikers, we see that at the very foundation of this nation, it was the act of enslaving human beings is horrendous, but the worldview, the psychology that it took to enslave human beings is still what's being debated. So when I do workshops, I pastor at C. Hubbard United Methodist Church on First Avenue South. Ms. Vera Coleman and Kristen, all are members there. I just got to say that, right? And we teach this every Sunday. We teach it in Bible study, because we got too many preachers that's talking about, well, we're not going to deal with your material reality. We're concerned with just saving your soul. So we have to ask, what is the mission of the church? Is it saving souls, or is it saving bodies, or is it both? And theologically, we know it's both. And so I think that the institution, and I'm speaking as the pastor that has been given the power to transform a broken world, is the church. And when we have Black preachers that are afraid to speak out on these things because, they're going to suffer some kind of political consequences, and they're standing with a governor who refuses to sign off on the Health Care Act, for example, it's a contradiction that runs really deeply. And so as I take my seat, I'm saying this: we have to say, are we going to be a prophetic voice to speak truth to power, or are we going to just go along to get along? And most of the healing, since the trauma was communal, the healing needs to be communal too. And we are developing communal circles to talk about dislodging this trauma from our bodies.
Pastor, thank you so very much. Emily, if you don't mind, please share with us.
Okay. Oh, well said, everybody. I'm with Elijah. Elijah have mentioned about being from South Africa, being from Nigeria, born and raised in Nigeria. I came to United States at my teenage age. I have almost 30 years again. I've seen it. I've experienced a lot of things going on. I would say in another part, I was in New York, went to school in New York before moving to Nashville, Tennessee. Racial, I've seen it, I've experienced it, but is that gonna stop me from moving forward in life? No, it's not gonna stop me. The long-term physical and mental health consequences people of color face currently now in this stage we are in, it's a lot of our people of color the trust issue, a lot of anger. I see it every day. Stress, depression. Our children get pulled over by police. They're afraid. I'm afraid for my children. I have a son who is, my older son is 23, and I have a younger son who is 17, will be 18 December this year. So I'm always worried and prayerful that my God should keep them safe while they're out there. My oldest one, that is the one I'm really worried about. He did run into the police officers that pulled him over. Yes, and that has ruined his record. He can't get a job, can't move forward. And I told him, don't ever give up. You need to keep moving forward. You gotta keep moving forward. So again, we just, people of color, we have to support each other and just look out for our children and our folks out here. So
thank you so very much, Emily.
Yes, yes.
Judge Bell.
So everybody said a little bit about what I wanted to say, but I'm going to go in the legal space since I'm the lawyer or judge on the panel. And so one thing that I can say, and this is just to be frankly honest with you, the Black community has always suffered from the beginning of the inception and the framing of our Constitution for the United States of America. Number one, it didn't consider us for life. It didn't consider us for liberty. It also didn't consider us for the pursuit of happiness. But the Fifth Amendment, the 13th Amendment, and the 14th Amendment came in to hopefully give us some constitutional protection in which we still have not been able to proceed and get the benefits from those amendments. The Fifth Amendment says that it prohibits the federal government and then the states from treating citizens unfairly. Have we not continued from day one, from when we were cattle or treated as cattle? A third had unfair treatment all the way to today. And so Pastor Caldwell and Vera Coleman and everybody that has talked before me, I know Senator Gilmore is going to go after me, but we do have PTSD and we have trauma and we haven't addressed it, not within our own community, not within our churches, not within our families. We've just said, and no offense, because I love Martin Luther King, that's my boy, but keep it moving. If you can't fly, then drive. And if you can't drive, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. And if you can't crawl, then have somebody push you, but keep going. That is true. Every generation is going to have their issues. Keep going. But guess what? Right now, we have to deal with the trauma. Right now, we have to deal with the PTSD. And then, by God, let's use the Fifth Amendment and the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment and just say, you know what, enough is enough. And this is all unconstitutional. It is time for the framing of the Constitution itself. And I tell my students all the time, if you don't know this Constitution, you ain't gonna get nothing done. We have to use this book. The law freed us, the 13th Amendment, but the part that we don't like is the enforcement of Congress, right? But for the punishment of a crime in the enforcement of Congress. But guess what it was? That it took 100 years for the Supreme Court to say yes to. And it was prohibiting slavery, but also the unfair treatment of African Americans as second-class citizens. 13th Amendment, 5th Amendment, 14th Amendment. When are we going to use those 3 amendments to push our agenda forward? That's all I have to say.
Thank you so very much, Judge Bell. Rounding out the second question is Senator Gilmore.
Thank you again, Dr. Black. I think 2 events that has happened during my generation that has a profound impact was when Rodney King was beat. Just to see those law enforcement officers hit Mr. King with such force and such hatred. And then when the police officer put his neck on Mr. George Floyd for almost 9 minutes, and to have such a disregard for life when life was draining out of Mr. Floyd, it makes me sad when I think about it. And the only thing I believe that sustains me and Black people as a whole has been our faith, because we really have had to endure some trauma from the beginning of slavery through today. And I believe we're beginning to, let me say this too, the trauma also is visited not just on Black and brown people, but also on Caucasians. When Caucasians have that much hatred for Black and brown people simply because they are Black and brown people, then it causes mental issues in their communities and high rates of suicide and drugs and opioids and some of those other negative behaviors. We begin to see it play out though in Nashville when we see so much youth violence. That I attribute to mental and emotional issues. And I believe it's because these young people see so much inequalities and inequities, and they don't know how to deal with it. They have not been prepared, and we as parents are working so hard trying to make a living that we have not been able to instill in our children the same values that our foreparents instilled on us, and to make us tough and to make us hold on. Sure, we've always been visited. Even when I was a young girl, I knew and could see the differences that were treated between me because of my little Black body and maybe one of my white students. But because of our faith and because our parents, we had such a close-knit community. Even if the parents couldn't help you, your neighbor or your aunt or your grandmother, somebody was always in the house and in the neighborhood to encourage you. You know, now I can remember just being in the store and people, when I was a little girl, people who didn't even know me would look me in the eyes and talk to me. What do you want to do when you grow up, young lady? And because they loved us. But, you know, we just don't take that time with our young people. And we're seeing it play out now in Nashville. It's a community issue, and we've got to get it solved. When we see a 15-year-old shooting another 15-year-old for no reason at all, supposedly because they were robbing them, that is an illness in our community, and we've got to, and it affects all of us, not just Black and brown people. It also affects Caucasians and white people as well.
Thank you so very much, Senator. So your collective responses signal to me that we are 401 years later still trying to figure out how we can move past and get, move past the separate and not equal, right? We're still trying to figure out how do we build equality? What does that look like? What does it feel like? How do we do it? And yet you also talk about this sense of determination and fortitude. To borrow from Elijah's statement, he talked about we should be at a point where we are beyond just surviving, we should be thriving. And I think you all have spoken to, or acknowledged at least, that there is an illness that exists in the Black and Brown community, and especially with our young people. And it is incumbent upon us to intervene and to have involvement in helping to create a healthier community. So thank you for your responses to this question on health and wellness. We'll move to another topic. Our next topic is on money and finances. And again, I'll give you some context before I ask the question. In the early 1900s in Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood district, known as Black Wall Street, it was one of the most prosperous African-American communities in the United States. The average income of Black families in the area exceeded the minimum wage, what minimum wage is today. And the dollar circulated 36 to 100 times and remained in Greenwood almost a year before leaving. Fast forward to the 21st century, the Black community has been inundated with payday loan businesses disproportionately targeting Black and Latino communities, expressly Black women, trapping them in a cycle of debt with interest rates as high as 400%. Pre-pandemic, the home ownership gap was 50% between Black and white residents. Certainly, there are other contributors to wealth inequity. However, considering these brief historical markers and the current state of Black wealth and money management, what inroads and/or approaches do you think would help close the racial wealth gap? What inroads and/or approaches do you think would help close the racial wealth gap? I'll begin with Ms. Vera. You're on mute.
Sorry. Here again, I have to keep going back to my teaching and my upbringing. No, money was not a luxury in my home. And I never forget, a penny saved is a penny earned. We knew to be frugal with the money that we did have. When we wanted something that was outside of just regular things that our parents would do, I had to earn the money. I kept people's children in my neighborhood, and I never forget that at school we could buy saving stamps, and I would take some of my lunch money and buy a saving stamp each week. We put it in a book, and you took it to the bank to redeem it, and I got a $10 bond. And so I still say, you take what you have. I never been, my folk were never ones to borrow. We lived within our means. They had a Christmas saving. And so I think that as you don't know how to reach for something if you haven't been taught that it's out there, and that it's not a give me, but we have an accountability to be frugal. Yes, there are gaps. Yes, there are people of color, brown and Black, who can't go and buy to a bank and get money for housing. I understand that. But I think that a lot of it has to start with your teaching at home about the importance of money and the value, not to just amass a lot of money for money's sake, but to use it in a positive way. That's just, I still have to go back to the home on that thing.
Thank you so very much. Next is Senator Gilmore.
Well, I think the greatest gift that you can give a person or a child is a good quality education, because that helps them to compete out in the world. It opens up different worlds for them. It exposes them to different careers, different people, different cultures. And it also helps them to be just a good quality, productive citizens. I probably would submit to you, if you went into our prison system, that the majority of those individuals in our prison system did not complete high school. They're probably dropouts. So we have to figure out a way to keep our young people in school, minimally to graduate from high school. And it would help tremendously if we can get them in college and get them either to be business owners, entrepreneurs, or working in some kind of productive way out in society. But when children don't finish school, sometimes they find themselves in undesirable behaviors just for survival. I think that there's a statistic that 1 in 3 African-American men are incarcerated. That just completely destroys our family. And so when the family unit is broken down, then all of society is broken down. So we got to make sure that our schools are equal. There's so much differences in our schools. When you look at Alex Green in North Nashville and Julia Green in Belmead, it's like 2 different worlds. And we got to figure out a way to make sure that children are getting a good public education and that all schools have the resources that they need. Thank you. Now you muted, Madam Moderator.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Next is Emily. I apologize.
Well said, Senator Brenda Gilmore. Again, education. You said it all. Education is the key to success. If no education, our Black children, our children cannot be able to move forward in life. Again, I stressed out earlier, people of color, we need to support each other. And it already started, but it's not there yet. We're not there yet. We need to support each other. I've seen advertisement on TV how we're promoting Black business. They're encouraging people of color to support Black businesses. Awesome. We still need to push forward. And again, if we support each other and build, that it will happen. And then we can start building wealth. And again, people of colors, if we start saving for our children's future, that is really, really important. We need to start now if you have not started. And I've always heard from folks saying, well, education is not made for everybody, but you can find something to do to better your life, to move forward in life. We just have to keep pushing. As Black, people of color, it doesn't matter who you are. We need to keep on fighting. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Emily. Next is Judge Bell.
You know, I would have to agree with everybody. I don't know if I could add anything, but I would agree with Vera. You know, my dad, when I was a child, I grew up one foot in and one foot out. So the saving stamps, I did that too. Put them in a book, get a bond, go to the little Q store, go pick out something you want. Had to earn everything, even if it was just sweeping and vacuuming once a week. You know, I may earn like $2 a week or something like that, whatever it was, to be able to get something that I wanted. But one thing that I did learn growing up, same thing with Senator Brenda Gilmore, that education was always going to be the key. We fought so hard just for education, and that was the one thing that we were denied. And you know, we worked so hard to have the opportunity to go to school, and so hard to have the opportunity to own a home, and so hard to own a business. But the thing is, the federal government, unfortunately, during the times of Greenwood and Black Wall Street, you know, I asked my students this, and I asked myself this, and I asked us as a race this: how do we come from being a resilient race, descendants of slaves from Africa, endure the most harsh treatment in America, and become successful, then allow a highway and some byways and Jim Crow laws and some racial discriminatory practices dismantle our structure that we created for ourselves? Education, church, businesses, opportunities. What happened was that we wanted to then lean towards federal government for a loan, denied. Business loan, denied. A home, a roof over our house, denied. But we have to get to the point where we will just continue to be resilient. Like Vera said, we know that these issues are here. But I agree with Senator Gilmore, it's all about education and figuring out how to maneuver and to keep going. But I would like to see, I don't know if it'll happen in our lifetime, that there won't be an arduous process, and you won't be denied because you're Black and brown, just trying to get a business loan to start this lofty dream. For example, Simone Biles is getting a penalty because she can twist a little bit different than anybody else has ever been able to twist in gymnastics. And so she can't get a point because nobody else could twist. I remember in basketball, they said it's a penalty to dunk the ball. So when you're great, you get a penalty for dunking a basketball. If you're great, you get a penalty for twisting 3 twists because the rules are only for 2 twists. These rules, we've got to figure out a way. We have to figure out a way to make the rules be attributed and fair to our talents and our dreams. If I went to the bank and told them something I wanted to do that came instilled in from me, it may not be something they ever heard of before. Because no business loan has been created for that particular institution or that particular company. But we've got to be able to figure out how we can get back to being self-sustaining. I would agree with you. We are getting to a point where I did a speech a couple of years ago that we still are dealing with separate but equal. Plessy versus Ferguson said, no, separate is equal. And then Brown versus Board of Education, separate is not equal, but you need to come together. And then look at us now, we're still separate. You got Alex Green and Julia Green, those are separate, and they're not equal. So we just twisted the words. We're not equal, and we are definitely still separate. So which one worked? Plessy versus Ferguson or Board versus Education? Neither one, because the bottom line is education, and it needs to be equal.
Thank you so very much, Judge Bell. Next is Elijah.
Well, I would agree with everyone's answers. I think education is a huge part of closing that gap. And I also think there is an aspect of society that is really hurting just everyone financially, but specifically minority communities. I feel like denouncing the way we as a society see money and what money can do and what money can buy, or should buy more importantly, is something that we would profit from. Because I feel like now, especially if you look on Instagram or social media, which actually, what I've been studying in school recently, actually affects one's spending habits a lot if you're on it a lot. And that is, it kind of promotes this idea of leisurely income. You don't do anything, but yet you have this luxury Louis Vuitton bag, or you have the newest iPhone, and things that we apparently need, but actually don't need, and that people are not allocating their money appropriately. If minorities are just already making less money than other communities, yet they're still trying to buy the same things that everyone apparently needs, then it's not money that's being appropriately allocated, which is something that you learn. More importantly, you learn what you want and what you actually need. And I feel like society is really blurring those lines, that you don't need to go into debt to get this particular item, or you don't need to get the latest iPhone. What you need to do is you need to learn how to save. You need to learn how to allocate your money appropriately. And though it's a priority system that I think is kind of messed up right now, and society is really promoting that, and that money buys success, it buys happiness, it buys beauty, and it really doesn't. It really doesn't. You see people who have the latest iPhone and they're struggling, and it's really just I think a lot of it is societal and the other half is educational. And if we fix those things, then we could really see a closing in this gap.
Thank you so very much, Elijah. And rounding out our third question is Pastor Caldwell.
Yeah, so with this question, I hear a lot, maybe not in this conversation, there's a lot of emphasis placed on personal responsibility. And that is that Ray needs to pull up his pants, and that he, and I would say, if we're on the job, we do need to pull up our pants. But I want to be careful not to play this respectability politics, because when we think about what has happened historically and the systemic kinds of oppression from the redlining of our communities, and when you get redlined and you don't have home ownership, and that's the greatest way to generate wealth and transfer it into the community. So while I am huge on personal responsibility, what about the structural responsibility to correct these histories of exclusion and oppression and white supremacy, that continues to plague us? So I think living wage jobs are a good thing, to get people started. But even with education, I want to expand the parameters and think about the trades like plumbing, electrical, auto mechanics, things that used to be in schools that people could take and didn't necessarily want to go to college for a 4-year degree. I had a plumber at my house not long ago, and I wish I made what I had to pay him. So, I mean, it's some lucrative money in that. But to think about it, there are people who are coming together and networking to keep the dollar. There's a thing on Facebook, Black People Making Moves, with Danielle McGee, and they're talking about how do we keep the dollar, within our reach. But to be clear, that when Metro Nashville is 30% African-American, almost like 27, and yet less than 5% of the contracts go to African-American contractors, that's systemic. And we can do something about that because that's taxpayer dollars that we all paid into. And I want to be as outraged around the mayor and city council not doing that as I am around Ray not pulling his pants up. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Caldwell. So to the third question that addressed money and finances, what I heard from your responses is, especially borrowing from Pastor Caldwell, is this sense of systemic destabilization and the importance of needing to restructure systems so that we can bring about the equality that is important, especially for Black and Brown people. And definitely kind of the foundation of your responses is steeped in education and the importance of not only the individual, but the collective systems being educated and how they help influence and bring about this level of knowledge and ability and skills so that we're able to manage not only our individual selves, but our community selves. And, lastly, it's just don't live beyond your means, right? So when you see the stuff, the Gucci's and the Louis Vuittons and whatever that flashy thing is, the iPhones, that you don't give in to that kind of pressure, that you're living with whatever is in your bank account and nothing more. So thank you for for your responses to the third question. We're going to move to our fourth and final question, and this is in the area of success and barriers. Perhaps one might argue that the previous questions were kind of dark and touched on some heart-pulling strings that pertain to our histories. And so now we'll turn to success and maybe even some barriers. Again, I'll give you some context before asking the question. Far too often, the projection of people of color is bleak and dark, but we know differently, right? So we see the genius and the resilience of people in our communities. For example, Victor Hugo Green published in the mid-1900s the Negro Motorist Green Book, a safe place guide for Black travelers during the Jim Crow era. Edmonia Lewis was the first African American and Native American woman to achieve global recognition for her sculpting work. We can all point to present day history with Kamala Harris as the first female and woman of color as the vice president. Now, granted, these are just a few notables, Black notables, but as you consider the genius and successes of people of color, as well as your own achievements, what do you think is needed to continue embracing and projecting Black achievements? What do you think is needed to continue embracing and projecting Black achievement? I'll begin with Emily.
Oh, Dr. Black, I knew you were gonna call me first. I knew you were gonna do that. As mentioned before on the last question you asked, again, Blacks, people of color, look, we need to support each other. We need to share our knowledge with each other. If we don't do that, we will not be able to move forward. We have to come together. And that's how we're gonna start building that wealth. If not, nothing will change. Everything is still gonna stay the same. Again, we need to support our Black businesses, and we need to speak out. Voice out your concerns. If you don't do that, you're just in silence, nobody hears you, nothing will change. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Emily. Next is Elijah.
I would say, and you know, there's so many ways to look at this question, but I really feel like one way to really continue embracing Black achievement and also increasing it would be by validating and celebrating every single success that occurs within it. I feel like so many times there are things that we don't really validate sometimes, and it doesn't really promote that, oh yes, this is actually success. Like graduating high school, that is a success. Just because on average in America that's something that just happens, it's still a major achievement. And celebrating that encourages other people to do it as well and validating it as well. And I feel like, I mean, even at the beginning of this webinar, I was like, oh, I mean, my success, if you can call it that, because I compare myself to everyone else on this panel and they're just fantastic. But just because I am not, you know, a senator or a judge does not mean that I'm not successful in my own right. And I feel like validating one's own efforts to success and just one's own efforts in general and celebrating those are something that we really need to see more of in the African American community. I just feel like it's kind of like, oh, they did that, cool. But it's like, no, you should celebrate that, because then it encourages people who haven't done it to do it. And so that would, I'd say, validation and celebration of every success would be my answer to that question.
Thank you so much, Elijah. Judge Bell.
And Elijah, I would definitely agree with you. Everything that we accomplish, everything that we do needs to be celebrated. Whatever it is, whatever age, whatever career, totally agree with that. But one thing I have always wondered about growing up in this community, and I'm a member of New Covenant Christian Church, and I go to a number of other churches. I think I'm under watch care in a lot of different churches, maybe under watch care to see Hubbard soon too. But you know, I go everywhere. I'm a member of New Covenant, but I go everywhere. But I've always wondered, I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, got to give a shout out there, and Top Ladies of Distinction, and I got a lot of memberships. NAACP, you know, this goes on. But I've always wondered, why can't and when can we get on one collective agenda where my sisters, Zetas and AKAs, and my sisters and brothers in the Christian faith or the Muslim faith or the whatever faith, the human faith, whatever. I mean, I believe in Jesus Christ, but I can't tell you, you know, what to do. But why can't we get on a human agenda? Why can't we have a collective agenda that instead of it being one organization doing their 5-point thrust and another organization doing their 3-point thrust and another organization doing their thing and one organization working with this school and working with that school, why can't we come up with a yearly agenda every year with a strategic plan that these organizations, these churches, we're all going to focus on this particular thing for our community. We're going to start at the bottom and go all the way up. We're going to start with pre-K and go all the way up, because that's how we can change a generation. Maybe we don't need to start at high school, or maybe we start at pre-K all the way through high school. I'm not really sure. But I've always wondered, why can't all of the sororities and fraternities, why can't all of the churches, why can't all of our organizations get together? You know, divide and conquer, right? We got to come together. We got to link up and everybody play their part. If you're good in one thing, you bring your talent to the table. You're good in another thing, you bring your talent to the table. And then if you're good in that same talent, support the agenda. You don't have to always be in front. I like when I'm able to support somebody. I love it when I'm able just to walk along and not necessarily be the leader. But if I have to, then I will. And Brenda has taught me, Senator Gilmore has taught me very well, when you just link up, sometimes you stand behind and sometimes you stand in front when needed. But the thing is, we got to move forward. We can't move forward in 20 agendas or 20 same agendas, but doing 20 separate things. We've got to, at some point, come on a collective agenda, focus on the most important thing. And I would agree from this conversation that it's education. And if we can change the trajectory for our schools and the ability with trades and opportunities and entrepreneurship and you know, think of the question, when was it that we thrived as a community? We did thrive as a community. When was it? How do we get back to that? Aren't we better now than we were then? It's always, like you said, Vera, it's all, my parents even told me, every generation should move forward. So you got to be kidding me that we can't get back to what we did in 1940. You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. I know we can do it. I know we can do it. We just got to do it. Like, this is do it. This is do it. We got to do it. We just got to do it. So I think if we can do that, then we can make it happen.
Thank you so very much, Judge Bell. I believe that. We just got to do it. Pastor Caldwell.
I think that some of the things we can do is first to learn our illustrious history. I mean, the thing is, if we knew our history in terms of the Black folks have been so deeply a part of the American experiment that she would be unrecognizable if it were possible to remove her influence, right? So this power, we are to disrupt these narratives that said that we were lazy, these narratives that said we weren't fully human, all these things. And what has happened is, over the last year or two, the worst thing that could happen is we've seen white supremacism and racism in all its ugliness. But the other thing, if you look this past summer in the streets all over this nation, there were 50–60% white millennials, white folks who want to be allies, who say, I've been sold a bill of goods. I know that this is not the right way to be. I know this is not democracy. What must I do to be saved? We have to be able to give folks marching orders to say, because you sit at this position that garner resources and opportunities, how to open the doors for folks and to restructure your hiring practices, restructure who gets grants, who gets contracts, these types of systemic things, and both have to take place at once. It is so comprehensive that I don't know if it's possible to have a Black agenda, as it were, but there is, we do need some clearinghouses, as Judge Bell mentioned, that we can say, okay, we'll take this part of the load and you can take this part, and let's be in communication and in a collaborative kinds of sense. But again, it goes back to who do we know that we are in our being, and it is never what you call me that matters, but what I answer to. So that is the huge piece that I would leave this group with, is not allowing someone else to be the arbiter of our identity. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Pastor. Next is Miss Vera.
First, I want to say that I agree with everything that has been said. And I'm just going to have to go back just a little bit in the historical approach to it. You know, when I came in my day, everything was segregated. Everything, all the schools, public transportation, the parks, recreational facilities, the movie theaters, skating rinks, etc. But you know, due to the proud and ingenious ability of the Black community, they knew how to get around a lot of these things. We had the historical Jefferson Street and all of its amenities. And then, you know, if we just look at our history again, and if our younger people could just know that they do bring something to the table. Look at the achievements that have been made by Black and brown people in spite of the obstacles. You know, many of our prominent and professional Black people, they pushed to the limit so that we had parks, and a lot of our parks produced a lot of professional athletes, and my husband was one of them. Our segregated schools produced many students who pursued degrees and went on to be successful in civilian and government employment. We have acclaimed musicians, writers, doctors, lawyers. You know, when you succeed, then you help somebody else and you pass it on. So I think as our young people, if they knew our history, they do have something to bring to the table. And you need to come to the table. The seat is there because we're certainly on the menu. So you need to come to the table and to know that you do have ancestors, generations before you that made contributions that are just any civilization would want to make. Come to the table, know your history, and know that you bring something to the table.
Thank you, Ms.
Because you're on the menu.
Thank
Yes.
you, thank you. Last but not least, our final question is Senator Gilmore.
Thank you. Thank you again, Dr. Black. I think it's easy to be overwhelmed because there's just so much discrepancies when you look at African Americans, Latinos, and look at the larger community. Whether it's education, looking at the poverty gap, that's huge. Housing, I think that the pandemic has shined the light on these discrepancies, particularly in housing. If we look in Nashville, in order for people to be successful, we find that housing is probably the key denominator. And we've had so many people lost their jobs because we're the front line and essential workers. We've lost our jobs. And so therefore eviction notices have put us out on the street. Looking in North Nashville, we see gentrification where elderly people, people who lived in North Nashville, their lives have been pushed on the perimeters. But we can't be overwhelmed. We just have to keep working and fighting and moving forward. And I agree with Elijah, we've got to celebrate those successes that we have. In my case, it may be something small as going to a school and reading to a student so that they can see a role model and they can want to emulate and be motivated and inspired to do better. Or because I'm elected official, it may be grandiose, like advocating on policy changes that help improve all Tennesseans. But I think if we all live by the mantra that the space that I'm in, I'm going to do everything that I can to make it better and to improve it and to bring people along with me. So when we are successful, we don't get in and kick the door closed, but we help those who are coming after us. That's the way that we sustain and celebrate Black achievement.
Thank you all. Just thinking again about your responses, some key things jumped out to me. One of them, Judge Bell's statement made me think about during Kwanzaa, one of the Kwanzaa principles is Ujima, which means collective work. And her comments made me think about the importance of partnering and coming together as a community in order to move forward not only our agenda, but to move forward the sustainability and growth and prosperity of people of color. The other thing, Pastor Caldwell said something that made me think about the importance of access and opportunity. We have to have access to resources. We have to have access to our elders in order to learn from them and to have the fruits of their knowledge and wisdom. We also, another thing that you said that struck me was the importance of alignment and aligning ourselves, not just within our own pockets, but bringing these collective groups together so we are aligned with one purpose and one agenda, so that we can meet the forces that often would hinder us from the access and the opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the close of the questions that were posed to you for this Black Voices of Nashville gathering under the 50 Forward family. I want to thank you for allowing me to serve as your moderator. Your time is not quite over because we've asked our guests to pose questions they may have of you based on the conversation that we've been having. And there, I've seen at least one question that's posed. We do ask our guests, if you have a question, please pose those in the chat. And I saw one question, and I'm hoping that Sherry or Elizabeth may be able to help me navigate that particular question. I know that it was in response to the question about health and wellness and what your position or perspective is about social media influencing how we are impacted by our oh, sorry, here it is. Do you think social media plays a major role in what we're doing today? Again, I know that was in response to the health and wellness question. And so maybe you can think about social media impacting how we are not only responding to one another, how we're treating one another, and then how that factors into our health and wellness. So is there anyone that would like to respond to that question?
I will. I did respond to it when she asked it, but I said absolutely. You know, also video games and a false sense of reality. You know, kids are still forming their cognitive ability. You know, their brain cells. They aren't making good decisions and understanding the reality and consequences aligned. And I'll give you an example. I had a case that came before me several months ago, and it was very alarming. This little girl, 14 years old, wanted to go hang out with her cousin who was 17. the 17-year-old boyfriend was cheating on her. And so she went over to her boyfriend's house and was cheating on her. And when they got there, not cheating, I guess they broke up. She poured lemonade on his car. And because of pouring lemonade on his car, the little boy shot the 14-year-old girl in the back of the car. I have cases like that come before me once a week. Some young kid making some stupid decision. When I was a kid, you pour lemonade on somebody's car, somebody pour lemonade back on your car. Somebody throw, we didn't have cell phones back then, but somebody throw something at you, you throw it back at them. I mean, it's just a little fight, little petty fight. Y'all resolve it, y'all good. You move on, y'all best friends tomorrow. Now is life and death. Those video games are the sense of reality has really been completely removed. Social media, the instant gratification of making something look to be what it's not. All of it is causing a problem. I didn't grow up with social media. I didn't grow up with violent video games. I knew how to just debate my issue as a kid. I never really got in a fight, but if we did, it was just a tongue fight. You know, you just talking back and forth, like your mama, whatever, you know, just getting through it. Now it's life and death, and it's unfortunate. You know, I'm seeing cases like that all the time. And yes, social media is playing a huge role in bullying and violence. And our kids do not have a sense of reality, no sense of reality. And social media is playing a huge part into that.
Is there anyone else? Thank you, Judge Bell. Anyone else that would like to answer this question?
I think too, with social media, what it provides is an opportunity to hide behind. You can put what you want out there, and then you hide behind. You don't have to show your face. And I remember when I worked, and I would get a voice message from one of my managers that I supplied applicants to. I would not respond. I would go over to their office and face them one-on-one. I think the ability to just, as the older people would say, you threw a rock and then you put your hand behind your back. It's not being accountable. It's being able to, and I know it's played its role. There are benefits to it. We're using it right now with the pandemic and everything. So there is a positivity to it, but it can also be abused.
Anyone else like to weigh in on this question about social media? Elijah?
Yeah, I think especially to just piggyback on what Judge Bell said, is with this whole false sense of reality, there are drastic consequences to it, and a lot of them are mental. We can see that individuals, particularly adolescents, feel like a lot of them feel ugly or not, intelligent enough, or they don't feel like their lives are, is great, because when they turn on their cell phones, they see like, one of their friends in Cancun with, something, and it's also the celebrities that we're essentially promoting and celebrating things that are not realistic, and then putting those images in front of such malleable brains. Why are we surprised that leads to such terrible consequences? And it leads to these decisions that are being made, whether it be, plastic surgery, which is expensive and sometimes a lot of the time unneeded, and various purchases and life actions that are just to be like the people on social media, when, like Vera Coleman said, they don't really exist. So why are we trying to reach this place that doesn't even exist when it's actually hurting us terribly?
Thank you so very much for your responses to one of our audience members' question. There is another question, and that question is, I work at a financial institution and am wondering how I can directly impact the Black and Brown members of our Nashville community. Specifically, how and where should we be focusing our attention to lend funds and teach financial wellness? Is there anyone that would like to respond to that question?
Dr. Black, I'll take a stab at it. I think that there are two areas that we really need assistance in the Black and brown communities. One is just education, what money, the value of money, how to use it properly, and the importance of savings. And then the other is making small loans to people in the community. I know we complain about advanced financial and these other kind of financial stores that are in our community, primarily in poor communities and disadvantaged communities. They loan small amounts of money and charge these terrible, terrible interest rate, as you mentioned, Dr. Black, some of them as much as 400%. But when your lights are being turned off, or when you can't make a car payment, sometimes you can't go to a family member or a friend, you don't have anywhere else to turn. You don't have a checking account because you don't make enough money. And the only place you can turn sometimes are these kinds of establishments. But if the traditional banks would make small loans to people, I remember when my husband and I married, and it's been 100 years ago, but the first loan we got was from, then it was Third National, and now it's SunTrust, but it was for $300 to buy some furniture. And I dare say that you cannot go into a bank now and borrow $300. But sometimes people need it. They need it to keep the lights on, or to provide food for their children and their families. So I think the greatest asset and benefit our financial institutions could do today is, one, is to provide financial education for our next generation. And then the other is to provide small loans to people so that they will not be forced to go to these banks that charge these horrible interest rates, where they end up staying in debt for the rest of their lives. And it's not just disadvantaged communities. I had a cousin who told me that she went to one of those institutions and she used her car as collateral. She almost lost her car because the interest rate just keeps continuing mounting and mounting and mounting and mounting up. She, has a support system, and the family was able to nickel and dime together and save her car. But not all families have that support system. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I know Judge Bell wants to respond to this question as well. I will add that in terms of education, it's helpful when banking institutions can go into our schools. And our schools is as early as elementary to help teach young people about financial management, financial wealth. And you're right, Senator Gilmore, going to these payday loan institutions, the research says that when a person makes one loan, they end up in many cases having 10 additional loans to try and pay off the debt. So it's just a cycle, and then it becomes a family cycle, because when one family member does it, then they bring along others in the family. So it just keeps the Black and brown community indebted to these kinds of institutions. Judge Bell.
I definitely would agree with Senator Gilmore and also Dr. Black. But I think also as a former entrepreneur, and my wife has a business, it's hard to answer the question, Black and brown individuals to dream, to be an entrepreneur, to have opportunity and not get a starting line of capital to get them off their feet. A lot of the time, we wonder why there's so many generations that have generational wealth that aren't Black and brown. Well, we didn't have farmland passed down to us. We didn't have a business passed down to us. We didn't have a number of other things passed down to us, or we may still be living in a circumstance where our family is still getting there. And yes, it may not get passed down to me, but it may get passed down to my nephew or nieces or, children, if I ever have any. But you know, it's got to be also leveraging ourselves, because that's how generational wealth started in the very beginning. Caucasian individuals were able to get USDA loans for farms. They were able to get government-backed loans, FHA. Public housing was geared just to leverage and allow communities to grow. And so it's all about, if you look at the history, it's about having a loan. It's about also having an operating loan to make ends meet. It doesn't have to be one with high interest rates. It doesn't have to be one that, you know, puts us in a negative position, but a small business loan, and then also maybe having some financial literacy classes for entrepreneurs, I think would be a great initiative for a bank to take, to say, you know what, we're going to be intentional in this focus, and we're looking for Black and brown individuals to give small business loans to, and to leverage themselves for those opportunities, and to make their dreams also come true. Because we can't just go to, I call it plantation money, or generational wealth. We don't have it. We didn't get it. Sorry. We've got to get it somewhere. And if you want to balance the playing field and you have an opportunity to do so, please be intentional. Please give us an opportunity to leverage ourselves, so then we can then help ourselves and help our communities as well.
Thank you so very much. I know that we are rounding out our time at 11:30. In fact, we have gone about 3 minutes beyond our time that's allocated for this conversation. There is one question that is remaining in the chat. And so I would ask if one person or maybe two will make some very quick responses to it. We certainly want to acknowledge audience members who have posed questions. This last question is, someone said it's nothing for a young person to be carrying a weapon these days. What can Nashville do to resolve this issue? Is there one person who would like to respond to this question?
Yeah, so like, let's think about the violence and the need to carry a weapon. This violence is only a reflection of a larger violence that has been coming out of the White House for the past 4 years, that's coming out of a violence of spirit that's inflicted on people. And this fear that has been stoked, and that I need to protect myself. And the other part is economic. I don't want to get robbed. I don't want to be carjacked. And so when we have resources in the community, there's a direct correlation with it. When poverty drops, crime drops, right? And so it's as much economic as it is anything else. So I think when we start dealing with the economics of it, we'll see a decline in the violence.
Thank you so very much, Pastor Caldwell. I saw, Emily, that you wanted to respond to one of the questions. We'll give you a quick second to do so.
I just wanted to comment on Senator Gilmore's statement earlier about the loan places where people can go get money if family support is not there. We have a lot of program here in Nashville that will help seniors or anyone that not able to pay their rent or their bills. But the other side of the issue is these programs that are out here supposed to be helping the seniors or anyone who need help. The process is so slow, so before they get to the seniors or anyone that need help, it's too late. At the end of the day, they lose their home. They don't have no electricity in the home. So what do we do to possibly reach out to these programs to see what they can do to speed up the process for the seniors and individuals to get help? I would love to possibly maybe visit some of this program and see what they can do because we have a lot of seniors right now that need help. Yes, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Emily, thank you so very much. To Emily, to Ms. Vera, Elijah, Pastor Caldwell, Senator Gilmore, Judge Bell, thank you so very much from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to serve as a moderator moderator today and to hear from all of your wonderful wisdom, insight, all of your encouragement, your recall of history. It certainly is a necessary time for all of us to be united and to advance our community. So thank you, the very best to you, and God bless. Thank you, 50 Forward, for allowing me to be a part of this. You should know there were over 60 people who joined us today for this conversation. So you've impacted a small village that will hopefully spread like a puddle in a little stream, will have that ripple effect and will continue to grow. So thank you all. I see Kristen joined us. You're closing us out, Kristen. You have some final words?
Yes, ma'am. I too just want to echo, and on behalf of 50 Forward, on behalf of the team that put this together, I just want to thank all of our panelists today. I want to thank Dr. Black for doing such a wonderful job moderating. I thank all of just everyone who is a part of the discussion and who was watching and who submitted questions. We are just very excited to have had this panel discussion today, and we just thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank
Y'all have
you.
a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.